Paul Rudd's story doesn't begin with flashing cameras, red carpets, or a carefully planned rise to stardom. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, the way most real success stories do, with a kid who didn't look like a future movie star, didn't sound like one, and certainly wasn't treated like one. A kid who grew up far from Hollywood glamour in a normal household, surrounded by ordinary expectations, learning early that life rarely hands you a spotlight and that if you want to be seen, you first have to survive being ignored, because Paul Rudd was never the obvious choice, never the loudest voice in the room, never the one people pointed at and said, "That guy is going to be famous." And that is exactly why his journey matters so deeply, because it proves that greatness doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it sneaks in through patience, kindness, and persistence that refuses to quit even when nobody is watching. Born in New Jersey and raised mostly in Kansas, Paul Rudd grew up in a world where show business felt like another planet, something you watched on TV, not something you belonged to. And while other kids dreamed loudly about fame, Paul learned early how to blend in, how to observe, how to listen, how to make people laugh, not by demanding attention, but by understanding timing, subtlety, and humanity, skills that would later become his greatest weapons in an industry obsessed with ego and noise. His family life shaped him in ways that never show up on IMDb pages, teaching him humility, emotional awareness, and the idea that success doesn't excuse you from being decent, lessons that would quietly guide him long after fame arrived, because even as a young boy, Paul Rudd wasn't chasing stardom. He was chasing connection, that simple human desire to belong, to be understood, to make people feel something real, and that instinct would later set him apart in Hollywood more than looks, muscles, or marketing ever could. When Paul decided to study acting, it wasn't with a grand plan or a guaranteed path forward. It was a leap into uncertainty, one fueled more by curiosity than confidence, and that uncertainty followed him for years, because the early phase of his career was not glamorous, not fast, and not forgiving, filled with auditions that went nowhere, roles that barely paid, and long stretches where success felt like a rumor other people talked about, not a reality he could touch. And yet during this period something critical was happening beneath the surface, something most people miss when they quit too early, because while the world wasn't rewarding him yet, Paul was sharpening himself, learning discipline, learning rejection, learning how to stay grounded when your dreams feel fragile, learning how to show up again and again without applause. And that kind of endurance builds a different kind of confidence, the quiet kind that doesn't need validation to survive. Hollywood didn't open its arms to Paul Rudd. It tested him, ignored him, underestimated him, and placed him on the sidelines. And instead of becoming bitter or desperate, he adapted, choosing to remain himself in a system that constantly pressures people to become louder, harsher, and more aggressive just to stay visible. And this decision, though it cost him speed, gave him something far more valuable in the long run: trust. His first noticeable break didn't turn him into a superstar overnight, but it gave him a foothold, a moment where people finally started to recognize something different about him. Something disarming, something genuine, because Paul Rudd had a rare quality even early on: the ability to make audiences feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel like they were watching a real person instead of a performance. And in an industry built on illusion, authenticity quietly stands out, even if it takes time for people to notice. While others tried to dominate scenes, Paul learned how to elevate them, how to support the story rather than steal it. And this approach didn't always earn him immediate praise, but it earned him something deeper: repeat opportunities, long-term relationships, and a reputation as someone people actually wanted to work with again, which in Hollywood is more powerful than hype. Behind the scenes, while the public saw a charming, funny guy, Paul was building something invisible but unbreakable, a career rooted in reliability, kindness, and emotional intelligence, traits that don't trend on social media but quietly determine who survives decades and who fades after one lucky hit. As the years passed, Paul Rudd's face became more familiar, but his rise remained unusually steady, almost suspiciously calm in an industry addicted to extremes. Because he didn't explode onto the scene and burn out, he didn't chase controversy. He didn't reinvent himself every year just to stay relevant. Instead, he did something almost rebellious in Hollywood. He stayed consistent, stayed curious, stayed decent, and trusted that time would reward substance over spectacle. A gamble that most people are too afraid to take because it requires patience in a culture obsessed with immediacy. He moved between genres with ease: comedy, romance, drama, each role adding another layer to his craft. Another proof that he wasn't just playing himself, but evolving quietly, intentionally, without announcing it, and as his resume grew, so did something else. Respect, the kind that doesn't fade when trends change, the kind that survives box office failures and industry shifts, the kind that turns coworkers into lifelong collaborators. What makes Paul Rudd's story truly inspiring isn't just that he succeeded, but how he succeeded without losing himself, because somewhere along the way, as fame slowly wrapped around him, he made a choice that many never do, the choice to remain approachable, to treat crew members with the same respect as directors, to show up prepared without arrogance, to joke without cruelty, to lead without dominance, and these choices accumulated quietly year after year, until he became something rare in Hollywood, universally liked, not because of public relations, but because of lived experience, because people who worked with him talked and word spread and trust grew, and opportunities followed, not because he demanded them, but because people wanted him there. And while audiences laughed at his roles, something deeper was happening, because Paul Rudd was redefining what longevity in entertainment could look like, proving that you don't have to burn bridges to climb ladders, that you don't have to harden your personality to protect your success, that you can move forward without stepping on others. Even in an industry that rewards the opposite dot, as he entered the phase of his career where most actors either peak or disappear, Paul Rudd did something unexpected again. He kept growing, not louder, not flashier, but wiser, choosing projects that challenged him, collaborating with people who valued creativity over ego, and allowing his career to expand naturally instead of forcing it into shapes it didn't fit. And this patience paid off in ways few could have predicted, because by the time the world fully realized how valuable he was, Paul Rudd had already built a foundation strong enough to carry him anywhere. Fame finally arrived at a level that was impossible to ignore, yet even then, he remained the same person who once struggled through unnoticed auditions, the same person who understood rejection, who respected effort, who didn't confuse attention with importance, and that internal stability became his true superpower, allowing him to navigate success without being consumed by it. What's remarkable is that while Hollywood often ages people harshly, emotionally and professionally, Paul Rudd seemed to move in the opposite direction, not just physically, which became a cultural joke, but spiritually, because with time he appeared more grounded, more confident, more generous, as if success had softened him instead of sharpening his edges, and this reversal challenged everything people assume about fame, because it showed that power doesn't have to corrupt, that visibility doesn't have to distort, that success doesn't require sacrificing empathy. And this quiet contradiction made him stand out even more in a world full of carefully manufactured personas. Audiences didn't just watch Paul Rudd, they trusted him, rooted for him, felt safe with him. And that emotional bond is the rarest currency in entertainment, because it cannot be bought, forced, or faked. It can only be earned slowly, through consistency, sincerity, and years of showing up as the same human being regardless of circumstances. By this point, Paul Rudd was no longer just an actor. He was a symbol of something people desperately wanted to believe in, that you could succeed without becoming cruel, that you could grow without losing humor, that you could remain approachable even when the world places you on a pedestal. And this belief made his story larger than films, larger than box office numbers, larger than awards, because it touched something universal, the hope that kindness and patience still have a place in a competitive world. His journey quietly challenged the idea that only the loudest voices win, showing instead that sometimes the ones who listen longest, work steadily, and treat others well end up lasting the longest. And this lesson, woven invisibly through his career, is what turns Paul Rudd's life from a celebrity story into a human one, and this is only the beginning. Because what happens next is where Paul Rudd's story truly separates itself from every predictable Hollywood narrative. When global superstardom finally arrives, when expectations explode, when pressure intensifies, and when he proves, beyond doubt, that staying human might be the boldest career move of all.